All right, everybody, welcome back to the channel. I am Brian Lee Durfee right there, author of The Forgetting Moon and The Blackest Heart. Today, we are going to be reviewing Tad Williams' second book in his Last King of Osten-Ard series, Empire of Grass. Okay, before we get into the review, though, I'm going to do some name dropping because I do consider Tad Williams to be one of my good friends in the business. Not only did I read all of his stuff when I was a kid and become a huge fan of his, at a younger age, I also, now that I'm a writer and have been to a lot of these conventions and Comic-Cons, I met the man. We share the same agent, the same literary agent. We actually share the same literary. In fact, I approached my literary agent specifically because he represented Tad Williams, and Tad Williams writes huge books. And I'm like, I write huge books, so I know you're not going to be scared of my huge book. And the agent was like, yeah, let's do it. Not only that, but Tad Williams gave me a nice blurb for my book number 2. I don't know if you can see it there. But he gave me a nice little shout out, so. And, you know, he signed my entire collection of Tad Williams novels. So I've got all of the Tad Williams novels signed. So if you haven't gathered, if you haven't picked up on it, I'm a huge fan, and I consider the man a good friend. So let's talk about the book itself. We always start with the packaging of the book and the cover design and the graphic design. You know I love graphic design and illustration. This is a great illustration by Michael Whelan. Michael Whelan has done all of the Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn and Last King of Osten-Ard and Otherland and Shadow March books. He's done all of Tad Williams' covers. And he's a great illustrator. Everybody who reads fantasy or science fiction knows who the illustrator Tad Williams is. And this is one of his best paintings that wraps around all the way around. It's great, great, great striking cover. Not only that, I'm going to do some more name dropping, people. Isaac Stewart, the map maker who did all the maps for Brandon Sanderson's Stormlight Archives and Mistborn, also drew the maps for The Last King of Osten-Ard. So Isaac Stewart did these wonderful maps, and there's probably a dozen maps sprinkled throughout this book. And Isaac Stewart, who lives just down, I live in Draper, Utah, and Isaac Stewart just lives down the road from me. And he's a good guy. So I got a lot of connections and a lot of ties to this book. Not only, I'm going to start with the title of the Last King of Osten-Ard. It might be Osten-Ard. I don't know how it's pronounced. I don't know how everything's pronounced, even though I actually listened to the Audible of this. Actually, I've listened to the Audible of everything of Tad Williams. That's an aside. We won't get into that. But what we got here, The Last King of Osten-Ard. As I was rereading this book and kind of getting into it and seeing kind of where it was going. So I read this when it first came out, and then I just reread it now here the last couple weeks. And as I was reading it, and I saw this title of the whole series, The Last King of Osten-Ard, it filled me with an ominous dread, because we know that our main man Simon is the king of Osten-Ard right now. In the original trilogy, Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, which comprises this and Stone of Farewell and To Green Angel Tower, you can see those right behind Conan Funko Pop. Anyway, those were about Simon's adventure and how he became the king of Osten-Ard. Well, now I'm like, wait a minute, the last king, what's going to happen to my boy Simon? And I'm kind of starting to figure it out as I was reading through this really carefully. Gorgeous writing, delightful writing. That's one of the reasons we love Tad Williams, is for his absolutely epic world building and his super gorgeous prose that fits right along with his medieval, just ancient world that he's created. I mean, this thing is steeped in history and lore. I mean, everything about great world building. If you want to study, for the writing advice people, if you want to study how to do world building, just start with Dragonbone Chair, read the Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn trilogy, and then continue with this second trilogy, because this is book number 2 in his next trilogy, and it is, the world building just is non-stop in these books. You learn every page you learn something new about the lore and the history of this ancient world that he's created. And it ties into what he's going for at the end, I think, and when we get the final book. I think it ties into that this world that we've been adventuring through is more than it seems. It's more than just your typical medieval fantasy world. It's got something of the ethereal to it. It's got something of the supernatural to it. And it's got something of, and I dare say, maybe science fiction to it. And I just can't wait to see where it goes. And it all keys off of this, The Last King of Osten-Ard. And the the Empire of Grass. Because the Empire of Grass, what we're talking about here is empires. Simon has become the king. He's basically a good dude. I mean, kings need to be ruthless, and just is Simon ruthless enough to keep these things together, all of these things that are happening? And what's happening is just the bad guys from the north. They thought that they were defeated in the first trilogy. Well, remnants of them remain, and they are coming back to reclaim their empires. And the Scythi, who are the elf creatures who have kind of lived on this ancient land all the way back through time. It's always been the Scythi sort of built all of the massive castles and all of the massive cities and even the ruined cities and all the ruins. Everything is built upon this empire that the Scythi created ages and ages and ages ago. And now that the evil people are coming back down from the north, and now we're wondering if they are really that evil, because it's kind of like Tad Williams in this second trilogy has really given them a voice. And you're kind of like, okay, now we get what's going on. Now we kind of understand why they might want to reclaim these lands from the humans as their own. Because they used to be their own lands, and the humans sort of took them. And so now it's like we've got this, all of our great characters like Simon, Miriam L, Binabik, Sludig, Eolair, I mean, Jariki and Aditu, and all of the great characters from the past are in this, but they're older now. They're no longer teenagers, they're no longer young folks, they're older, and they're dealing with the same problem from the first trilogy, but they're older and they're tireder, and it's kind of like they just don't want to deal with it. And then we get to the end, and then there's mysteries, because King Joshua, Prince Joshua of the first trilogy is missing, and he's been missing, like Luke Skywalker gone missing, Actually, the parallels between Luke Skywalker and Joshua are uncanny, because they both are missing an arm, and they both go missing, and they're missing in the second trilogy, and we've got to find them. And does he have heirs? And can we find the heirs? Like Luke Skywalker, did he have children? And who are those children if he did have them? Well, Joshua, in the second trilogy, he's missing, and we're like, did he have children? Who are these children? Are these children amongst us? And that was part of the book 1 of The Last King of Osten-Ard sort of left us on a cliffhanger, where we actually sort of found out that Joshua did have kids, and they are amongst us. Little spoiler for this book. Now we wonder if these kids of his are really even decent people at all. And then we wonder if Simon's grandson is an even decent person at all. Oh, the stand, my camera almost fell. You probably saw it wobble. I got to be careful here, folks. It's almost to tip over. So let's try to get through this video before it tips over. So, we've got all these different people vying for, it's like, it's Game of Thrones, George R.R. Martin said this was his main, Tad Williams was his main inspiration for Game of Thrones. So if you love Game of Thrones, you're going to love this. There's a heartbreaking ending to this book that I don't want to talk about, but I'm just telling you. Last King of Osten Ard, and then the very end chapter, the very end epilogue, there's just a heartbreak after heartbreak, mystery after mystery, cliffhanger after cliffhanger. And that's the way that all of his books are anyway. No spoilers there. Ends on a cliffhanger, a heartbreaking cliffhanger, and I can't wait till book 3. So, Empire of Grass, like every Tad Williams book, gets a 10 out of 10. Because this guy, if you followed my top 40 fantasy series of all time, you know where this guy falls on that list in the top 40. And as far as world building goes, I think next to Middle-earth, Osten Ard is the place I like to visit the most when I'm reading epic fantasy. So 10 out of 10.